Okay, so
Ah,
this is the first session of my final project. It's taking the form of 4 podcasts. This is kind of like a pre-discussion. I'm Jamie Davenport, and these are my friends.
Uh,
I think this is where you
all right,
introduce
so
yourselves.
I'm Charlie Duty.
oh, sorry. I'm Justin Cowdery.
Forgetting his lines 10 seconds in.
I'm a,
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to do just sort of a project in the vein of a lot of the discussions I've been having in my game analysis class, uh, and I wanted to dissect some like kind of transfem, some depictions and appearances of like trans women in interesting independent games that I've encountered over the years that I found like rhetorically like relevant or interesting or thought provoking. Um, so I just wanted to have some people along to have just an interesting discussion and see what we could kind of figure out. Um, I thought it would be an interesting topic personally because I am going through transition right now. I have been on hormones for a few months, and it's a very big part of my life. Obviously, like it's had a huge impact on me over the years with my mental health, and some of these games have been like very helpful in like exploring and kind of discussing identity internally for me. So I just thought some of these might be interesting to kind of explore later on with some new perspective and with some new eyes to accompany me. So I'm very thankful for you two for joining me on this. Um,
Yeah, appreciate it. No, I think
do
it's
you have
gonna be
any
a lot of fun.
thoughts on it,
yeah.
just kind of at a surface level?
I mean, for me, it's just sort of like, as far as like the kind of like media that I consume and just sort of like in general, really like other than you, I suppose, Jamie, just sort of like I don't have a lot of experience with this kind of thing, nor like any
Yeah.
like you just sort of like solid opinions on it. But I'm excited to kind of explore that thing, looking at these games and just sort of get like a
Oh yeah.
fresher perspective on some things, maybe from like a couple different angles.
uh, really interested, partially because the medium's not something I'm used to as much. Specifically, like stuff like visual novels are like a thing I have kind of not done as much of.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. For
also,
context, no,
oh yeah, sorry.
let's go ahead. I was gonna say the first game we're covering is a visual novel, but go ahead.
Also, just like interested in seeing the topic explored more. A lot of the stuff I've looked at from like specifically like trans creators is a lot of stuff from like either Kate Wirtz or a couple other smaller like comic artists and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would
So interesting
agree.
to see more like games and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like a very interesting space that I found very interesting with like discussing this kind of with discussing like concepts of like transgender identity. It's very interesting because you can use games to kind of simulate and try to like generate empathy or at least kind of provoke some thought by like trying to really like kind of put someone in someone else's shoes. Also just like games are about inhabiting, roles. So like that's something that just like is obviously like a very large part of like being trans, like is kind of understanding like how you can kind of hold yourself in different ways and fill like different roles within like society and among like different people, like you kind of show different sides of yourself to people, and understanding how to kind of shift and understand yourself in like the most deep level. So I
I
think
mean,
that's cool.
like it's so different, right? Because it's like when we're looking at like games as like an interactive medium, like it just sort of like fills like an entirely different role, just sort of like in terms of like how you connect with these characters and so like sort of the the way you establish yourself in these worlds, because it's very different than kind of having that like third party view of just sort of like like reading a story or like watching a show or something like that. You're kind of in it and you're like actively partaking in these things.
Oh yeah.
It'll be interesting to kind of be put in the like have a different full on perspective and have to experience that in the form of like a game. Like really hyped
Hmm.
for that. It seems like something
Yeah,
really
at least
interesting.
trying to like see like how someone approaches that, because obviously you can't do like a one-to-one kind of like
Yeah.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
It's never exactly the same, but obviously it's an interesting angle to try, an avenue to use in
Hmm.
discussing pretty much anything. um, so first off, I wanted to establish some terms just to kind of make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. There are a lot of like there's a lot of terminology like that trans people use and that you see used in circles discussing and among like allies and things like that, both to describe trans people and to like discuss elements of like their life that I think are relevant possibly to this project that I wanted to introduce here, but I wanted to do it in a kind of fun way. So I was going to pull up some little cards and hold them up to the camera and, you know, read them out. And then I want Charlie to try to explain the term as best as he can, even if
Without
he
knowing the
doesn't know what it
definition?
is. Well,
Okay.
you might know some of these. That's kind of what I'm kind of interested to see here. Then after him, Justin, if you have any thoughts or like clarifications or adjustments you want to make, you can go, and then I'll kind of finish it up, I guess. I thought it would just, you know, I've got to turn everything into like a terrible game, essentially.
Of course.
So, yeah, so first off, this one's probably pretty easy. Is it mirrored for you guys?
No. It looks fine. It looks fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
MTF, FTM.
I'm pretty sure that's. Is it like male transitioning to female and then female transitioning to male kind of thing, or it's like?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not the exact wording, but I feel like that's like.
Very close.
Okay.
I guess that was pretty spot on the money, so I'll just kind of take it from here. Yeah, it's male to female and female to male.
Okay.
It discusses, you know, their terms used to kind of broadly describe like the categories of people going through transition in one direction. It's broadly used to describe people who are, you know, not cisgender but still, you know, belong to one side of like the gender binary. Here's, you know, kind of an accompanying term here, NB.
Let's see. And.
You see it spelled other
ways.
ways.
I think you just misspelled envy. You know, I think, you know, just maybe something went wrong in the writing process there. I have no idea.
Justin, you have any thoughts?
It's interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about it for a while, but when if you like literally split it in half and spell it out, like you get the letters for it.
Yeah. Because people also write like NB. It stands for non-binary. So this is people who are, you know, in transition or their gender identity doesn't line up necessarily with, you know, a strictly male or female, you know, more binary concept of gender. So they might express themselves in various ways.
Isn't non-binary just kind of already like a term for that?
Oh, yeah, no, MB's just like the shortened one. If I just wrote non-binary, like, you would probably be like, I get that kind of. I know people talk about that.
Okay.
Next up, dysphoria.
I hear that word thrown around a lot, and I believe that's like, not exactly like dissociative, but just like, isn't it more of like focusing on like the psychological aspect of just sort of like feeling like you're not in like... You kind of feel wrong in your own skin or something like that. I'm not 100% clear on that. Okay.
You have any thoughts, Justin?
Not specifically, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no. Gender dysphoria generally, like, you know, is used to describe people who feel discomfort because their sense of identity is different than the gender that they are currently perceived and kind of socializing as and that they exist as. Generally, they're assigned gender at birth, which aligns with, you know, their sexual identifications, whatever the doctor's like, you know, kind of charts to you. Essentially, that's usually what then your assigned gender identity as well at birth. Like, that's what you kind of are then grown up and raised as. So people who experience like a disconnect there, that's dysphoria. It's very closely related to dysmorphia, which is people who have like warped body image, who have problems with that. I actually originally construed a lot of my dysphoria as dysmorphia. I lost a lot of weight, you know, remember, Charlie?
Right.
And it was because I felt like, oh, if I lost all this weight, maybe I would stop feeling kind of like that disconnect. Like, I'm not really like comfortable in my own skin, essentially, like you kind of said. So.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Now, here's another one. I think I used this term earlier, HRT.
He's using gamer speak to say he's hurt. He's he's hurting, and I'm making terrible jokes here. I'm sorry, but I don't know that one. Justin.
Oh, yeah.
I can't.
Uh,
I was gonna say it's hormone. I can't remember the R, but therapy.
Replacement. Yeah.
Replacement.
Okay.
Yeah, it describes, the medications that transgender people use to better align their bodies with what their perceived image and sense of self is. So for me, I take estradiol and spironolactone, which are the most common, oral form of hormone replacement therapy for male to female patients.
Okay.
So here's another one. Eggs. Or egg.
Eggs.
And no, it's not like an Always Sunny reference.
Oh, okay. In your trying time. Is that like am I overcomplicating things? I feel like a lot of these have been way more literal than I've been trying to think of them as.
There are a lot of decently like just literal terms.
Yeah.
Where like with enough context you can figure them out.
Right.
Not too much, but.
I mean, you've shown me part of your grocery list there. I mean, I don't.
You got any ideas, Justin?
I mean, like, well, when I first heard the term, it was like, because that is one I know that's like more of a it feels like one I've heard through the internet mostly, where I was like,
Yes, that's
wait,
correct.
what's the context on this? It took me a second. Where I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, do you know what it is, or?
Yeah. It's like someone who hasn't like. It's right. It's like someone who hasn't fully come out yet about it, or like fully like accepted also as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people who come to
out
understand.
of your shell yet.
Yeah, people
Maybe.
who don't understand like kind of what they're going through yet. Eventually, there's like an aha moment. People describe that as like breaking eggs and stuff like that. You'll commonly see like common like works that like people relate to, or like are like, oh, that's like an interesting piece of like trans media that like spoke to me. They'll describe like it as like, oh, that's what broke my shell. So that's kind of like people who just haven't realized it out, pre-transitioning, like even really like sometimes even questioning. A lot of times eggs usually are people who are like kind of questioning and are thinking about this kind of stuff. Let's do this one. Dead name. Kind of a one.
Is that a like the name you no longer use after kind of deciding on a more like appropriate one for yourself? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the term commonly used to refer to people's names like prior to picking one that they feel better suits themselves.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Interesting.
This is more of a kind of joke one. The button.
The button. It sounds sinister.
The quotes make it kind of suspect.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm not sure if I remember what this one is even.
It's kind of a common line and concept that's presented to like people who are questioning their gender is essentially like if you had a no strings attached like button a la like can you press the button that just would make you a girl, would you press it?
Right.
And like generally like if people are kind of like I'm not sure how I'd feel about that, but like broadly people who are it's a good like kind of like thing for catching people who are like sitting on the fence. It's a good question to like kind of gauge your own intent and how you feel about just it in general.
Okay.
So here's another one. Stealth. And this isn't just like the mechanic in Sly 2.
Does this have to do with the games that we're playing? Do we get to play a stealth game?
Yeah, we're playing Metal Gear.
You could say that in
trans
some
rights
ways,
in Metal Gear. Let's see. Let me take my best educated guess. So stealth, I guess, would be referring to, like, maybe you're not like fully out yet, and you're trying to kind of like keep it under wraps, basically.
Yeah,
I'm getting some thumbs up over here. So.
Yeah, I'm stealth, generally refers to someone who's like kind of covering up the fact that they're trans at the moment. It's usually used for like people who are early in transition and are just not as open about it. I had a few months where I was like in really like kind of like true stealth, where I was like not really even discussing it as much. But like recently I've kind of been more like stealth outwardly to an extent, but like among my friends I've been not stealth.
Just letting
people
like,
also
a few people in, basically.
Yeah, people people commonly refer to like if like someone like me who is in stealth, they'd call that like boy moding. It's like oh, still rocking the boy fit.
Yeah. Okay.
And for like a trans mask person, they would be girl moding. Like they would still be wearing like the kind of usual stuff they would still presenting as they kind of would in the past, but internally they're aware like, oh, I know it's up, but I'm just kind of giving myself some time to kind of grow and get a little more comfortable before I transition socially. So I got one last one here.
Okay.
Passing.
Can I phone a friend?
Yeah, Justin, you got any ideas?
Do you want like hint?
I'll take a hint. I'll take a hint.
If you got an idea,
do you want like a hint? Kind of like more of an end goal type of deal. Or I guess like on the way.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
It would
Is
come
that, like-
after.
it's
It
like-
would come after stealth.
Yeah, that's generally like
Is that
the
like the
case,
kind of like
obviously.
end result of like a transition, basically, or like a?
In sort of a way, passing refers to when someone, for example, me as a trans woman, if I were to pass, that means that someone who I, kind of meet in passing or something like that, that's not where it comes from,
Okay.
would see me and be like, oh, that's a woman. That's not just like not necessarily like they wouldn't cop that I was trans. They would just kind of be like, that's just like a cis woman. Like that's someone who was born female, who was always female, and that's kind of the way they see me. So like it means if you're doing that, like you're not recognizably trans, and at that point that's the goal for a lot of trans people. Obviously it's different for other like people. It doesn't matter if you pass or not. That doesn't make you any less valid or anything like that. You can exist however you want, obviously, but for a lot of people, myself included, I kind of want to pass in the future. There's also a kind of a paired term here. Clocking is when people recognize that you are trans. It can be like kind of a certain thing. Like a very common thing that people bring up is if they haven't done voice training, if they haven't worked on like having a more feminine voice. I myself haven't like done any voice training. If I was to speak, like if I was wearing a mask, someone might be able to be like, oh, look at the hair. Like that's a girl, but they would clock me. That's like when the moment where they recognize like
Okay.
I am, I was AMAB, like I was born as a male. So that was the list of terms that I just kind of wanted to go over.
All
You did a
right.
pretty good job. You guessed some that I wouldn't
did-
have expected.
I did better than I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So some of those terms might come up in context in the games or might be kind of relevant in the games in certain contexts. So we might kind of wrap around to that. I might bring them up again where I feel they're relevant, kind of to underline them. But those are like usually the more kind of like in the know, like the lingo people would use, like talking about this kind of stuff on like Twitter or Reddit and stuff like that. But also it's how, I've talked with like other people like kind of in the know about this stuff. So
Twitter is really good for picking up on that stuff. That's where most of the terms I had heard were from Twitter.
Ugh.
oh no,
Twitter
that's
is
scary.
a-
Learning on
I
Twitter.
don't like that.
Yee.
Yes.
Hearing the words "Twitter is a good for anything" in any sentence is frightening.
Yeah. Hell, it's a scary place out there.
Oh God.
So now that we've gone through that, I want to quickly bring up the games that I wanted to cover here. So first off, of the 3 games, I wanted to talk about We Know the Devil, which is a Western visual novel that talks about, like... I don't want to spoil things, I guess, but it's more of, like, an interesting kind of, like, character drama piece that I think is really interesting and talks about, like, youth and kind of understanding yourself in a very, like, deep and personal way. Then the next game I selected was Secret Little Haven, which is what I was talking about earlier, like a game that's trying to simulate and kind of emulate elements of the trans experience in like a way where you can kind of imagine or try to kind of put yourself in the shoes of someone experiencing gender dysphoria in like an interesting and interactive way. And then the third game I wanted to cover was If Found, which is like a very cinematic piece that is just essentially like a story of a kind of a young trans woman and kind of discussing her identity and finding her place. And I wanted to cover all these 3 games because I thought they were really interesting or like thought-provoking. They made me kind of sit with myself and go like kind of reassess my goals and like how I was feeling internally. So like I think that was kind of a sign that like they had something to say. So that's why I selected these ones in particular to wrap back around to and discuss in this context. I don't know. Okay. All right. I'm just explaining things here.
Yeah,
like
no.
Part 1, there's not much discussion if it's just like, here's what's going on.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they're like two-thirds of the people on this right now haven't played the games, so it's not like we can't add a ton of
exactly. It's been ages. Also, I would like to add, it's been ages since I've played these games, so revisiting them is going to be really like illuminating because some of them I don't really remember specifics from. I think the one I'm most familiar with is this one up first, We Know the Devil.
Yeah, you played that one pretty recently.
I played it kind of recently for like Halloween a year ago or something like that, maybe 2. So it's pretty fresh. The other one's less so. But for each game, I was thinking we kind of go through and do some traditional stuff, like look at, first like kind of be like, but maybe summarize it really quick, to kind of go over our feelings on like the plot, structure, mechanics of the game. Then maybe we could kind of start talking about like themes, and if we think that like a game, like we can kind of analyze like what do we think the goal of the game was, or like what were some of the important themes and concepts that were promoted or discussed in this game, and did we learn anything from them? Like, did they actually successfully advance whatever they were trying to say? So I was thinking we'd kind of take a look at ideas like that as we picked apart these games and discussed them.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you guys would kind of think like, oh, let's touch on that, or like let's talk about that as we go through?
I mean, I think you pretty much covered the basis of it, just sort of like talking about the themings or like the central ideas. Maybe we can like just highlight the things that we find interesting, or just sort of like the things that we're coming across in there. Honestly,
yeah,
I think you covered our bases pretty well there.
Yeah, I feel like they're, those are kind of the main things to discuss. So I guess. But obviously, if there's any other subjects that we feel are relevant after playing a game, we can touch on those. I was also thinking we could kind of compare and contrast the games a little bit to see, maybe that would help us kind of illuminate what each one was trying to accomplish, seeing how other games handle similar concepts. So, yeah. Okay. I'm looking forward to playing these games and talking about them. I think it'll be a really interesting time.
Yeah.
Really quick, I wanted to just kind of bring up now, like, I don't know, this is more of just a formal thing, like content warning. Wah, wah. We know the devil has like some kind of like pop notions of like Satanism in it, and also deals with like some vaguely like body horror kind of depictions of certain things. And those are kind of the like, if those are kind of like weird, maybe uncomfortable, but I think you guys are both fine with those concepts. So
yeah.
So
cool.
That's kind of the only problem I could foresee.
No problems there. I guess I don't.
Sorry, it was more of just a formal thing. I don't want to seem like I'm throwing people into like the deep end on stuff.
Satan, I'm out.
Next weekend we're watching Kuso though.
Effed up.
Not today, Satan.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that
Awesome.
covers the first
Yeah.
session. So
Cool.
let's split. Yes, we'll talk about this whenever we're done.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
All right.
Hyped.